latest in the series of Access Live webinars in association with the Event Production Show. This session, Building Digital Events, is brought to you in partnership with our sponsor, LED House. A big thank you to them and to you for joining us. With in-person events all but banned for much of the past year, the aim of this webinar is to explore the work and experience of operators who have pivoted to launch digital versions of their real-life events due to COVID-19 restrictions, have launched ticketed digital events, services, or are involved in their production. We do want to hear your questions, so please use the Q&A function, and I'll put your questions to the panel during the last 10 minutes of the session. To get the ball rolling, I'll let the panel introduce themselves and provide a little background about their work. Just to say, Drift CEO Rick Salmon is running a little bit late, so you may well see him appear on the webinar in the next 2 or 3 minutes. Let's get the ball rolling. Ben, at Showcase, can you just give me a little bit of detail about your role and what you do at Showcase, please?
Sure, thanks for having us, Chris. My name's Ben Collins and I'm the founder and MD of Showcase. We're a live production company that facilitates clients' events in the indoor and outdoor marketplace for the events industry, primarily corporate and focuses on indoors. And as you know, we've all stopped, so we now find ourselves in the virtual and hybrid world.
Okay, great. And joining us from Holland, we've Ruud Berends. If you can just talk me through your work with IFF and Eurosonic and a little bit about just touching on what you've kind of done this past year.
Yeah, I'm the head of conference for Eurosonic Noordslag in Groningen, the Netherlands, which is well, we're supposed to celebrate our 35th birthday last January this year with a big party in physical edition and all that stuff, but we ended up with no party and a digital edition, which turned out to be really great. We are a showcase festival and a music business conference. We normally have around 40,000 people there, 4,000 plus delegates, and around 130, 140 panels, seminars and sessions. I'm also involved in the IFF in London, which is the International Festival Forum. And we also had to run that digitally in September last year, which was one of the early ones.
Great, okay. And over to you, Matthew. Obviously, you've been involved in Carnival for many, many years, but this past year's Carnival looked very different. It's still very eclectic, but very different. Can you just sort of talk through a little bit about your role there and how the event sort of took shape last year?
Thanks for having me, Chris. My name is Matthew Phillip. I'm the CEO of Notting Hill Carnival Limited. Most people will know, but for those that don't, I think we're the largest event in Europe. Last year's Carnival, or the last Carnival we had, 2019, we had an estimated 2 million people. I lead a very small but dedicated team of about 7 people, and when it comes to Notting Hill Carnival, we work with a whole host of partners, both strategic and operational, from the Metropolitan Police, the Fire Brigade, St John's Ambulance, etc., and also the Carnival community. So we've got 38 sound systems, 74 costume bands, 14 steel bands, 3 live stages, and I think 6 Brazilian bands, as well as a host of artists and performers. And for 2020, obviously we couldn't go on the street, so we undertook to do quite a large online offering. We were determined that we couldn't, well, we knew we couldn't recreate Carnival digitally, so what we decided to do and frame it as that we were celebrating Carnival, which is why we included a lot of interviews from pioneers, etc., as well as some of the performances, and also we included things like the cooking and things that make up the experience of Notting Hill Carnival. And that took even more partnerships and working with people than the real life event. If anything, although we thought it might have been easier when we started, it was a much more challenging than we initially thought, but we think it worked out well.
Lovely, thanks Matthew. Welcome Rick. We're just...
Huge apologies I'm late. I did tell someone that organised it that I was going to be a few minutes late. There was something I couldn't get out of. I massively apologise for being a few minutes late.
No problem at all, not a problem. We're literally at the stage where everyone's introducing themselves, so if you can just kind of give me a little bit of detail. Obviously, you know, you come from an artist management background and you launched Drift last year on the back of some great and successful sort of intimate streamed live performance shows. Can you just give me a sort of brief potted history of Drift and your role in the company, please?
Yeah, no, thanks guys, and hello everyone. Yeah, so I'm one of the directors of a company called ATC, which is a management company and live agency with offices in London and Los Angeles and Copenhagen. We represent about 70 acts for management and about 400 through our live agency. People like Tom York, Nick Cave, PJ Harvey, and others, Laura Marling. And then, yeah, my partner Brian and I came up with a harebrained idea that we thought we should try and do some live streams with some of our artists at the beginning of the pandemic last year. We're looking at what other artists were doing and just finding that we felt kind of, you know, that kind of DIY approach to live streaming wasn't fit for purpose. So we embarked on the journey of doing a couple of shows with a couple of our clients, Laura Marley and Nick Cave. Both shows went phenomenally well, and we realized that we were kind of embarking on almost kind of a new format creation in a way, and so by that point realized that we had to set up a new business to do this across a broader range of artists and artists that we didn't represent. So we set up Drift in June last year, and we've now done 18 shows, sold over, well, nearly 500,000 tickets, generated, you know, $8 or $9 million worth of revenues, and some very big events, you know, things like we did Andrea Bocelli live from Italy in December, which sold 70,000 tickets. We did Niall Horan from the Royal Albert Hall, Niall Horan from One Direction, which sold 127,000 tickets. And you know, they're big global events. We sold tickets now in 171 countries, so truly kind of globalizing and democratizing live music. So yeah, in an otherwise very tricky environment for us as a business, and obviously us as an industry, as a management company and live agency, this has been a real silver lining for us, and it's been a real joy to be part of something so creative and so innovative. So.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Right, Matthew, I just wanted us to start with you. Obviously, we were talking about how, you know, Carnival, you delivered quite an array of kind of content, you know, ranging from cookery classes to people discussing or reflecting on previous editions of the event. You know, you had Spotify doing a sort of dedicated microsite. It was quite a selection of interesting content, really, that sort of reflected the diverse kind of event that it is. So, I mean, can you just talk me through briefly kind of, you know, how much planning was involved in it, how labor intensive it was, and also, you know, how costly was it all to sort of pull it together?
It was probably nearly twice, for us as organisers, probably cost almost twice what the street carnival would cost. So it was very expensive. Yeah, but even that was because of the fact that we were able to bring on a lot of partners to help with the process. So we gained a lot of partners in 2020. To be fair, a lot of those were conversations that we've been having for a couple of years, but the pandemic meant that everybody's focuses were changing, and we were able to kind of push these relationships further and develop them further. So we had partnerships with the likes of Instagram and Facebook. You've already mentioned Spotify, but we also had Twitter. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. There were so many, but that's how we were able to kind of, you know, work things through, by working with people with their specific expertise and markets, and pulling it all together. That's what Carnival is all about. It's really an organic, you know, it's a community-led event. The community are the artists. There isn't one artistic director. There's literally hundreds, and each of those represent small communities. Yeah.
So essentially, the partnerships are really key then. So, you know, Samsung and Spotify, in terms of the kind of sponsors and the partners, Are they the sort of backbone of the financing then of the event?
Absolutely, you know, because we don't benefit from any ticket sales. It's, you know, it's always been a free event. So even though we were going virtually, we didn't think it was appropriate to start charging. Carnival is, you know, it's not really about making money. It's about bringing, you know, people together.
Sure. Okay, Rick. I mean, you just discussed there about the sort of a bit about the background of Drift, but clearly, you know, there's been a great appetite for it, apparently from artists, because you've been doing quite a lot of shows, but clearly in terms of from the audience because of the ticket sales. But I mean, I guess, what's the two questions really? One is, you know, what's the feedback being like from the artist community? Because clearly your company, ATC, represents a good number of, you know, high-level artists. But, you know, you're not just doing shows with those artists, it stretches beyond that. So it's sort of two questions. One was, you know, really what's the feedback being like from artists, and how much energy and passion, or, you know, enthusiasm is there for it amongst the artist community? But also when it comes to the economics as well, I wanted to touch on that really. I mean, compared to a normal live show, obviously you've got an international reach, but how do they sort of compare financially in terms of ticket revenue?
Yeah, so two good questions. I'll try and be as brief as I can. So on the first question about the kind of the creative and the artist feedback, fascinating, because it's been an interesting journey. When we started out, we I suppose justifiably were questioning ourselves as to whether or not, you know, what it's like for the artist to perform with no audience in front of them, you know, with no feedback. Therefore, how does that dynamic work? What happens between songs when there's that kind of dead air? And then, you know, people were rightly questioning as well when we did the first two shows with Laura Marley and Nick Cave. You know, fair enough, we managed those clients, and both artists are, I suppose, well suited to perform in that kind of acoustic solo environment. So people were questioning those things quite rightly. And then, you know, but as soon as we did the first show with Laura, I mean, obviously it kind of suited her, that kind of silence as a performer suits who she is as an artist. And in a similar way, it kind of gave Nick the scope to deliver something truly filmic, and to kind of broaden the kind of the narrative and dynamic of what you can deliver as a live event. So we very quickly realized that actually you just approach it in a different way. We're not trying to create a live show experience in the sense, you're not trying to replicate it when you've got 10,000 people in front of you in a building. But the jeopardy and the energy and the excitement and the risk remain when an artist is performing a live event, even if the people are at home rather than in the building. So you kind of almost don't lose any of the magic, but what you gain from the ability to create a vastly more dynamic, more kind of narrative-based show. In some ways, strangely, we realized that actually almost doing a physical show in front of an audience is almost more restrictive in a way, because there is this kind of fourth wall between the performer and the audience. There has to be some sort of gap between the stage and the audience, and so it's a weird thing to overcome. But taking that out of the equation, it enables you to, it kind of creates a much more fluid narrative environment that you can create. You know, so it's a deeply kind of creative format. So I suppose, you know, and every single artist we work with has just utterly loved it, frankly. It's very different. I think it's already becoming something that we're all thinking of as managers and as everybody involved in it. You know, yeah, you do a normal live tour, you'll do a live stream, you'll do a music video every now and then, you'll create some content for social channels. It's all part of the kind of the toolkit that an artist can use to communicate to fans. But without a doubt, live streaming provides this opportunity to present live music to fans in all corners of the world, people that can't ordinarily get to a live tour. I mean, let's face it, you know, even if a very well-established artist does a you know, comprehensive global tour, they may be only going through 50 or 60 cities. Well, there's hundreds of millions of music fans around the world that are being underserved. So this kind of gives you an opportunity to globalize that. And then to answer your question about the financials of it, I suppose you have to look at it in two ways. We have some frustrations with the costs of putting these shows on, because if you're doing it with multi-cameras and you're doing it at a certain level where it looks really beautiful, we're finding it frustratingly hard to get those costs down below, say, 35, 40 grand. It's almost impossible to do them for less, unless it becomes very DIY, where you just get a couple of mates with some iPhones and so on and so forth. But that's not the way that we're approaching doing these shows. It's not to say people shouldn't, but it's not the way that we're approaching it at Drift. So it's a little bit of a frustration, because we want to do more shows with more developing artists. But of course, in order to sell enough tickets to make enough money to cover the cost of 40 grand's worth of production, you've got to be a certain level of artist. So it's a little bit of the chicken and egg, and a bit of a frustration to us, which we're working to overcome. So that's at the lower end. Of course, at the higher end, the economics are incredible. The margins are enormous. I mean, you know, the Niall Horan show, you know, it's public knowledge, so I'm not talking out of turn. You know, 127,000 tickets. It generated just south of $2.5 million worth of gross. So you know, the margins were huge, and vastly more than what Niall would be able to gross in one ordinary show. So, you know, at one end of the spectrum, it's a global tour in one night with an almost unlimited audience. At the other end of the spectrum, harder for younger acts to get into, just because of the fairly high threshold of cost that it costs to pull off these shows. Great answer. Thanks, Rick. Okay, Ruud, I just wanted to kind of bring you in here. Obviously, Eurosonic is Noorderslag is a brilliant mix of up in Groningen in Northern Holland. It's a great mix of kind of a multi-venue showcase festival. So you've got artists performing all around the town or city, if either a small city or a big town, I'm not sure which, but
City.
thank you. And then you've got the conference, which obviously unites, you know, people from the international live event community. So having been at brilliant event, but you've told me that it was quite challenging to bring it all together this year digitally, but it was an event that was very warmly received. It worked very smoothly from my experience. But going forward, would there be a concern that, I mean, would you expect maybe that if you were to have a sort of hybrid version, that you'd increase ticket sales by enabling more people to kind of experience it? Or would you be concerned that actually, you know, it might affect ticket sales and people would choose to just sit at home and just sort of interact with it digitally? What's your sort of view on that going forward?
Well, I think it's a little bit too early to say. I think certain digital components are here to stay. As long as it doesn't influence your ticket sales, and it adds to the package. I think like stuff like we did, like with the newsroom, that is something which you can incorporate in a physical event as well, and that would work really well. And I think like you can play around with content and on demand, and you could have a full registration when you're on site, and you could think about a light registration where you have limited access to content, and you can watch it from home. If that's live or on demand only, or a combination, that's too early to say. We might be forced, to do a hybrid event anyway, because we still don't know when this will end and where does this go. What will be possible again in January, I guess nobody knows, because we don't even know what's really going to happen next week. But yeah, I totally think like we were forced into a digital edition. I mean, we were still aiming for a hybrid one in October. We were really forced into it, and that was a adventure, I would say. I mean, it's not our specialty. Our specialty is doing something live for the live part of the music industry, which is the opposite of digital. So there was a really interesting learning curve with a lot of challenges, and but I think we managed quite well, as you said. Thank you for that. And I think like everybody who attended our conference and the festivals, we almost unanimously received very positive feedback. So that was really encouraging. But like please aid normal physical events in January next year.
Okay, Ben, I wanted to bring you in, and you've got an interesting perspective from the production side, really. So obviously, everyone's had to kind of work pretty quickly when it comes to having to kind of do we go hybrid, do we go completely digital, are we going to be able to go live? Everything's changed so quickly, or been changing so quickly over the last 9 months, that people had to be very nimble and move quickly. So from the production perspective, what would you say have been the kind of biggest learnings, and in terms of what's working particularly well technology wise, and what kind of technology are you kind of looking at now in terms of the way this whole sort of platforms are evolving? What should people be looking out for?
Yeah, sure. For us, looking into because we obviously cover an array of events depending on our clients' needs. Back end of last year, so from September when we launched that department, obviously everything's virtual. But to echo what the guys have said, is we thought there might have been a hybrid possibility before the second and third wave of the pandemic came, and it was obvious that there was not going to be that. It was going to stay online and be purely digital. So from our point of view, it was about, we're always asked, everyone had to deliver the event that was already going to be live in 2020. So really they had to fulfill what they'd already set out to do. So we managed to pull in the work where we do the platform and the technology, which is with technologies that have been around for like TV and film, so green screen or the physical backdrop. But it was more about obviously that connection of the audience and the participation. Excuse me. And what it is the focus is about the audience interaction and participation, and the two are interaction and engagement, and the two are different. You want to get someone to then be able to participate, and then you want obviously someone to be able to interact. So the two are very different, and that's the bit the clients have been struggling to understand, how we can get that across to their audience and their demographic of what it is that they might be offering as an event, and ultimately then being able to monetize that, and how can we then get some ROI on that investment when they bring in partners like ourselves. So from that point of view, it was around the software. It was around how that, technology is not an issue. Obviously, that's what we do. There's a plethora of equipment out there that can facilitate this. As I say, streaming has been around. There has been some small webinar-based platforms, but it's more about now how we can then get the user online to be able to work around an event and navigate their way to still be able to get all the engaging content that the customers are putting out there, but equally make it a very seamless transition. We can't ever get around the physical, I'm sure, which we'll get touched on today, about the physical interaction side of things from a live event to a digital. But what we know is that we're going to go into a hybrid state before we go into a full live state, looking at H2 of this year. For us, there was one thing that started to edge out, which has been around again. It was around about 2014, I think, which was XR technology, which you saw on some, quite apt for this panel, is there was people like Katy Perry were using, which is where they're extending the reality of the physical backdrop. So that can be fully digital, can be fully virtual, so it can be all made up, or we can have an enhancement of some reality within that. But what that allows you to do is extend past the backdrop that you've got. So XR technology started to come through in our industry with some of the companies bringing that out as a rental product to facilitate what would become, I'd recommend, probably the hybrid side of the digital event. So where you have some audience participation. Obviously, what we don't know, and the bit is really hard because we haven't got the insight of what the government's going to tell us, is what that magic number for the hybrid side will be. But XR technology is the one that we see is starting to be used more and being talked about with some of our clients, to come away from just a physical traditional backdrop or just a purely green screen virtual one.
Okay, I mean, Matthew mentioned earlier on about that the costs were quite substantial for Carnival, and obviously they had partners like Samsung, obviously, and Spotify kind of, and they helped that sort of side of things. But I mean, budget-wise, just two quick things to touch on, really, in terms of sort of budgeting, and also in terms of timelines. If I was to be planning a big live music conference or a festival or a concert or whatever, and I was looking at delivering that digitally, how much of a sort of
Is that to myself? Sorry.
That's for you. 2 questions. Sorry. Again.
Sorry. So well, yeah. So with budgets, that's critical, obviously, because obviously the economy's been hit with the pandemic. You know, not just our industry, the economy in general. So everyone's obviously trying to do stuff. They don't come to us for the DIY version. They're coming to us to obviously enhance their offering. So platform engagement, you want to be looking at, because especially if you are trying to monetize this, you want to be looking at 2 to 3 months out minimum. But then you've obviously got to do the pre-planning side of what is it the event's going to do online, how that event's then going to be orchestrated. Are you going to do pre-record, or are you going to do it live? Because ironically, I think, although, as I said, the technology's been around for many, many years in TV and film, for example, and streaming and the like, all of our events were live. Obviously, we're a live events production company, so we were always doing this live, but everyone wanted to pre-record to start with because it was new. It was just new. It's business, but just different type of business. So what they were trying to understand is, well, we'll film it all because then we can still make it perfect, and then when we will stream it out on the day so people can then view it then. But now we're starting to see that interaction more in a more of a live state. So we're doing more live features, and some of it's pre-recorded. We really need to be engaged 3 months before to give you the best and fullest production offering we can offer for you, because it's actually front end. And as I think Matthew said, it's twice the amount of work actually doing it digitally, because obviously when you do live, you've got that steady paced pre-production approach before the event goes live, and then the carnage happens on site. I think everyone would agree. If they do a live event, we're all busy on the day or the build up of that show. But with an online event, we've obviously got to get all of that ready to be accessible straight away, because that's different. Digital's there, it's immediate. So that's critically where I say you'd need to be. Budget wise, you can start minimal. You can just take certain elements of, like, for example, what we offer, and then you stream to your own platforms. Or if you're doing the full solution, and you're going to, depending on what you're doing, XR is obviously expensive technology because of all the multi-camera tracking you're doing, the physical backdrop, the servers, the pre-production design work that we have to put into that based on what the agency's looking for to fulfill as an environment on that. So that's upwards of 50 grand. So you can range from 10s to 15s right up to 50, 60s. Still, from our point of view, from a live event in the corporate market, still cheaper than running a live event, because you don't have the physical F&B, the venue, and all the other infrastructure costs you would normally typically find registration in a normal event.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Rick. Just a couple of. I'll keep asking 2 questions to each of you, but so apologies. But the first question is, I'm just interested to hear from you about the live versus on demand aspect of it, because obviously, with Nick Cave, that was filmed at Annie Pally, and obviously it was already pre-recorded. It was theatrically released as an album. And it was kind of like filming. But then again, you've done other things that have been on demand. So they're very different sort of visual products. But also, when it comes to kind of your perspective from behind the cameras and everything else, the organizational side, what are the learnings? And, what's easier? Is it easier? And what's the take-up like? It's for audiences.
Yeah, so good question. Just to be clear though, so we're all talking the right terminology. So obviously there's live, there's pre-record, which can go out as live, and then there's VOD, video on demand, and that's a different thing. So we don't do VOD, and by VOD, just for those people maybe whose English isn't their first language, video on demand literally being like YouTube, i.e. you can watch it at your own leisure whenever you want, and it's available on your demand. We don't do that at Drift, and we're actually pretty staunchly against it for a number of reasons. So let me answer that first, and then I'll come on to specifically answer your question. the problem that we have with VOD a little bit, and this isn't in any way to criticize YouTube or to criticize artists making content for VOD platforms, because of course we do that as managers ourselves and we would encourage it in the right context, but it's a very different thing to live streaming, and in my opinion should remain completely separate. You know, the slight problem with anything on demand, and I'd say the same thing is you know, in the film and TV and world, as well as obviously the live streaming world. Ultimately, in life, anything that is ubiquitous and available at any time to us as consumers is cheap by its very definition. And it essentially drives the value of that product down because of the nature of the way that the markets work. So what we've found in the music industry is, of course, that by allowing everything to be essentially always available on YouTube, whilst it has some great benefits from a promotional perspective and some great benefits from a marketing perspective, when it comes to the value of the art, it unfortunately, the byproduct of it is it drives it down. Now, I can tell you as someone that's worked in the music industry for 24 years, I've never made a penny out of a music video. And I've been involved in some very, very big music videos. But even when they're generating tens of hundreds of millions of streams, you know, the way that the money's filtered down to the artist and the actual creator and or writer and or producer and everybody involved in the creation of that initial IP, you're talking about peanuts. And of course, most of the time, the way that artists' deals are done with labels, the royalties that a standard commercial record deal paid through for audio visual exploitation tends to be at half rate in any case. So, you know, firstly, the video costs always are 100% recoupable, or at least they're half recoupable, but most of the time they're 100% recoupable, of course. So an artist's unrecouped royalty account it'll just increase that never-ending pit of money that an artist owes their label, or rather an artist is unrecouped with their label. And then on top of that, they're recouping it at half rate. So you just never recoup, right? And so ultimately the creators behind music videos and anything that's on demand don't make any money. Similarly, anything that's created for content on social channels, as we all know, doesn't make any money. Most of these social channels are still unlicensed, remarkably. And obviously no artist is making or creator is making any money out of putting videos on Facebook or Twitch or Twitter or Instagram. So, you know, it may come, but it's not there at the moment. So we find ourselves in this weird situation where VOD creates zero value. It's anathema, really, to live stream ticketed events. And if there's one incredible byproduct of what's come out of ticketed live streams this year, it's that we've really realized as an industry, fuck, we can actually make money out of this. This generates revenues. This is actually increasing the value of the art form. People will buy a ticket for it. It can genuinely, legitimately create an economy, and it has done. So it's really, really exciting. Everyone wins. It's a very cheap purchase price for a consumer, yet they get to immerse themselves in a live performance for an hour or more with one of their favorite artists. It means that fans can buy tickets when they live somewhere where a tour isn't touring through. So it democratizes live music, and it creates a legitimate economy for the creators behind the music. So VOD and live streaming, two very different things. And then to directly answer your question, pre-record or live. It's a brilliant debate. About half of ours have been live and half have been pre-record. Ultimately, it comes down to the artist and the creative. If the artist is keen to create more of a filmic event where the approach that they want because of the creative would benefit from some sort of post-editing, then maybe pre-record would be best. Live has an authenticity and an excitement to it that we particularly love, but we do both. So it ultimately comes down to the creative. I have to say, personally, I love it when it's live, because it means things can go wrong and everyone has to be at the top of their game, and it's really exciting. And therefore, it's like real life, because things go wrong on live as well.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Matthew. I mean, looking back on your event last year, I mean, you had various things like the cookery that was interactive, so you had like audience interaction, and obviously that was the first year you've kind of really done it. Looking forward, what are the kind of key elements of it that were most successful in terms of audience engagement? That basically were sort of really the most economical bits, and I guess simply the question is, looking forward, what elements of it will you carry with you next year or this year and beyond?
I'll come to that in a second. I just want to ask, there's two questions in the Q&A that come up, which was the chunk of our budget and why it costs so much. Is Ben was talking about XR stages. So our live hosts over the weekend were on the XR stage. We broadcast for over 50 hours. So we produced over 50 hours of high quality content. It was all shot on ARRI cameras and lit beautifully. That's why it cost so much, because it was over 50 hours in the UK. We were in the UK at places like Abbey Road, the Royal Albert Hall, but we were also in Nigeria, Jamaica, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados. So it was a huge undertaking just capturing all of the footage, which is why it was so expensive. I think we've done it on the cheap, if I'm honest, because that's a lot, 50 hours. Just the editing time was an immense task. Moving forward, I think we were probably too ambitious, and there was times during the day where we had three channels running simultaneously. So in effect, it was actually more than 60 hours of new content that went out that we produced over the weekend. And we felt that potentially may have kind of split our audiences. So, if we do it again moving forward, we'll focus on one channel and mixing up the content that goes throughout that one channel.
Okay, great. Same question to you, Ruud, really, going forward. I mean, it's a simple question, but having gone through the whole experience and received, good feedback, but obviously, you mentioned that to me that, there were challenges along the way. If you have no restrictions at all and you can just do a live event, will you still be focusing on some sort of digital delivery? And if so, how extensive would that digital side of things be?
I think we will use some elements, yes. We're still discussing which ones. We were just past the evaluation stage of Eurosonic. I think also reacting on what Matthew said is we did a conference with 4 different channels. We had I would say 15% was pre-recorded, the rest was live. All the content was available on demand till the end of January. And that's one lesson we learned, is that if you do that, then the platform should be able to do pause, rewind, and fast forward on the on-demand content. That's something people tend not to think about, because that's the only way it would work if you do conference content. The shows we also did in the evening on 4 different channels, so people would hop, like they hop in the streets of Groningen. That content is available on demand till the end of this year. So yeah, I think looking back, what we should have done differently is maybe get a IT team, really get the proper knowledge, because you really need that if you want to do a proper digital event. I think we came up with some really cool ideas. That was the sort of CNN, because we're all watching CNN much more than ever because of the American situation. We came up with the idea to do a CNN newsroom to welcome our guests. We had a half an hour in between the 4 sessions all the time, so we needed some engagement, some entertainment, some welcoming. So we had a Eurosonic newsroom, which worked really well. I think something else which really helped the engagement was a really strong chat function. That is something people really need, because you're just looking at the screen for the whole day. So you have to give people something else than just plain programmed content. That tour carousel was absolutely amazing. People loved it. After 3 days, we had more than 10,000 one-on-one meetings already registered on the platform, which was mind-blowing. So many aspects of the platform worked really well. Some stuff that didn't work well was, but that is platform depending, and they're all still in some sort of a development phase. Invite-only meetings were quite difficult. So we had to sort of, do them on Zoom anyway and incorporate them in a different way. But it was, we're quite a big event and complex event, and we consist of many different elements. Trying to hook up and make all the systems work with each other was probably something which we underestimated, which gave us a lot of headaches. On the way, you solve one problem, you get 10 new ones. But I think like the newsroom and some other digital elements will most certainly will include in the next edition, but as a sort of an additional component of the physical edition.
Okay, thank you. Rick, going forward, obviously once live shows are back, there's going to be, I would imagine, a huge demand for people to get together and see bands in the flesh. So I'm wondering, how you're seeing your sort of digital business progressing when that is the case, if you like, where there's potentially less demand because people can go to physical events, but also how it's going to work in terms of, because a lot of these venues, like Union Chapel or Ali Pali or wherever, they're going to start having real live content and audiences coming back into the buildings. So 2 questions really, in terms of how you see the demand shaping up and what you're going to deliver and how that's going to work when we're back to normality, and also venues. Do you perceive there being any kind of impact there, or will venues be more than happy to have your money because it will just be another booking? What's your sort of strategy?
Yeah, I it's another good question, and I think it's going to be a really interesting journey. I think I would say this, of course, because of what we're doing at Drift, but I'm trying to take myself away from that and be more pragmatic as a manager. We're really confident that live streaming is a format that's here to stay, and that's not us saying it. Actually, it's really people saying that to us. I think, speaking as a manager, I'm more excited about one of my artists, Laura Marling, for example, doing a live stream around her new album than I am her doing a music video, because I don't know. Dare I say, music videos almost feel a bit old-fashioned now. Possibly, they still have a purpose, I guess, but they're quite sterile. They haven't really evolved for the last 30 years. I don't know how interactive they are. I don't know what the fans really get out of it. What they don't do, what a live stream does, and it's what we all love about live music, by the way. And just for the record, me being a manager and more importantly, a music lover, I can't wait to go to a venue. I literally can't wait to have a cold beer in my hand listening to live music. And it's the same for all of us. But what what a live stream does enable an artist to do is to create an experience for fans that can't be replicated in live. And music videos are one thing. A live show and a live stream is another. The collective experience of live music is what draws us to an event. We want to go, it's tribal. We want to go there and we want to be part of friends and family and like-minded people enjoying a collective experience. It's the same thing with sport. It's the same thing with anything collective. And the joy about a live stream, again, whether or not it's live or pre-recorded, it doesn't matter. But if it's a singular event that is broadcast globally, we come together around it, and it becomes a collective event. And that brings humanity together. It's been around for millennia. We're human beings that will always coalesce around collective experiences. And I'd almost go as far to say, to go back to one of my comments earlier about the issues with VOD, I almost expect us as a culture to move through VOD and kind of always on environments like, you know, many social channels, because then they're not collective experiences. We're in our own bubble, we're in our own world, in our own echo chamber. And I don't know, I think we might find ourselves moving on from that quite quickly as that kind of thing came, it might go. So I think, you know, a live stream provides us with the opportunity to present these collective experiences and events. So for that reason, I think they're here to stay. But you know, to answer the other part of your question, you know, yes, well, of course it'll change a bit, but it'll be, you'll decide to do it. You know, you might do a live stream at the beginning of a tour when you're announcing it, because you tend to be announcing a tour 9 or 12 months in advance. So maybe you do a live stream to announce the tour and touch on some of the content that you're going to be performing, or maybe you do the live stream at the end of the tour, like the last night. You know, you certainly probably do a live stream when you're announcing an album, or maybe when the album's on sale, you know, that week the album goes on sale. It's all of those devices that I think you can use, and it's such an engaging format. So I think for all those reasons, it's just another device and another tool that we can use.
Okay, excellent. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to bring in some of these Q&A questions that we've got here. Ben, sorry if you can sort of answer this reasonably briefly, but are there live studio spaces available in London or any other city which can be linked up to create 4 or 5 virtual spaces and stream to the same platform you've developed? So I guess multi-venue shows of any kind.
Can I be biased? Yes, is the answer. My 4 in London.
Okay.
So we have 4 in London, 2 in Westminster and 2 on the South Bank. 2 physical backdrop, 2 with green screen, so we can interact with both. All of them can be linked, but more importantly, because as I said, we have international client base who are looking to do international events this year, whether that's hybrid or live. And we know international travel won't be there, need to be able to link, so we could link to locations across the world. So that's no issue with the technology. As I said before, when I was talking about the XR, it's not so much the equipment that we needed to invest in and look at, it was the platforms themselves, the software and reporting side of things, because we're now not in front of each other to be able to communicate and exchange business cards and take details and network. The clients are needing the platform to do the work, which is what we developed. So with our platform, we can stream in and out, pre-record or live, whichever it may be. When we do the pre-record, we'll have the live host in the room, in the studio, whether that's physical or virtual. And then we will then push that out across our platform with all of the normal sponsorship integration that people will need, and then on demand after the event's finished. But then simultaneously to that is the data analytical side, which is another piece of software we've developed and launched called Eventalytics, which will talk and track every move anyone makes on our platform, which is critical for any event organizer, because just like you would do in an exhibition or a conference, you'd walk around and be scanned, and that's tracking all the data for the event organizer. So that is the bit that we've developed, but streaming, that bit, if you like, is the easy bit of the process, because obviously that technology and infrastructure was there. So we've just uniformed that across our studios. But again, if there was a studio in Manchester or a studio in Midlands, we'd be able to do that. And as I say, globally, we bring that in and stream out to multiple stages. So again, you could apply that into a festival environment if you needed to, if you go into the outdoor market.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, just one last question. I mean, this could be to any of you, really. I think probably makes sense to ask Rick this one, really, or these two. Which, but just quickly,
you love your dual questions, Chris.
I do, but I'm just sweeping this up a little bit because we've got to end any minute now. But it's just regarding, you know, the comparison with ticket prices between a charging model between live and virtual events. Obviously, you haven't got a history of as a promoter, you're an artist manager, but you know, you can see you can compare, I'm sure, having you know, a knowledge of the market. But also when it comes to booking talent, obviously, if you're booking your own talent, it's a little bit different. But the expectations, financial expectations, I suppose, from the artist, but also the costs of, the ticket pricing model. Can you just give us a little bit of a...
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I think it's all work in progress. To be honest with you, we tend to set the ticket prices based on it's almost kind of reverse engineering the budget in a way. So if we have a show with pick a random artist, doesn't matter, and you think that they're going to do 10,000 tickets, and we've developed a very specific kind of forecasting algorithm that's proving to be quite accurate when it comes to knowing how many tickets we're going to sell. It's quite a complicated process we've built over the last 9 months or so. So let's say we can fairly accurately say an artist is going to sell between, say, 8,000 and 12,000 tickets. Well, you then essentially say, well, if we know that artist wants to do certain type of creative, that type of creative is likely going to cost 100 grand. You can then start to reverse engineer the equation to get it to balance and say, well, if it's going to cost us 100 grand to produce it, we're going to need to spend 30 grand to market it, and then we need this and that, so the overall cost will be whatever, 150 grand. Then if we're going to sell 8 or 10,000 tickets, what ticket price do we need to set it at to be able to break even? It's that kind of mechanic, which sounds kind of almost rudimentary, but it's stood us in good stead so far. All of the shows that we've done so far have tended to oversell what our expectations are. So most, if not all, have been profitable. But it's that kind of process. I think the only consideration you don't have to take in is, does it feel too high or too low? Which I know is a completely arbitrary approach. But I remember when I saw the Billie Eilish show, it's something we didn't do, unfortunately. When it went on sale, I was surprised at the price. It was at $36. And that just felt, for no other reason than my gut, too expensive. But, similarly, when we did our first show with Laura Marling, we sold it at £12. That now feels too cheap. So, we tend to go somewhere between 16 and 20 quid. It's that kind of range. It's incredibly good value. Don't forget, it's per household, not per person. So if you and your partner or family are sitting down, or housemates sitting down, and there's 2 or 3 of you in the family or in the house, well, 15 quid, 20 quid, it's an amazing price, isn't it? So, I think when you consider that it's quite a commitment these days to go to a big show in person, especially if I was to take my 2 kids and my wife, for example, to the O2 and wasn't fortunate enough to get free tickets. It's a 400 or 500 quid night out, isn't it? To buy some tickets, to get up there, to have dinner, to get drinks. And that's a shit ton of money. You can only do that a couple of times a year, unless you're extremely wealthy. So I think it's the kind of, you want to keep the price point at a low enough level where people can make quite impulsive decisions. You're sat at home, you've been sent an email, or you've seen an ad on an Instagram page. You're like, oh shit, well, someone's playing tonight. 15 quid, I'll buy that. You want to make it quite easy. So I think that's the kind of the price point that we feel comfortable with, 15 to 20 pounds at the moment.
Great, thanks, Rick. I would like to go on and on. I think it's a really fascinating chat, and it's really difficult to touch on all of the sort of interesting work that you've been doing and all of the learnings really in the timescale we've got. But I think it's been a really valuable conversation, and I really appreciate all of your input. Thank you very much to all of you on the panel. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you've gained some valuable insight from today's discussion. See you next time as we delve into the world of sustainability and how event operators can find a balance between the COVID-19 mitigation measures that are no doubt going to be needed on site at events, and balancing that with minimising the impact on the environment. That is the subject of our next webinar. But thanks again to all the panel and for all of you that tuned in. See you next time. Thanks very much.